So, Kenneth, here we are. This is one of those rare moments when I will be able to get in the last word and not have to argue a point with you for hours on end. For those of you watching this video, I need to give you a little background. There are others watching or attending this event who, like me, met Ken at Queen's School in Rheindahlen, Germany in 1966, 60 years ago. Since then, Ken and I have kept in close contact and remain close friends. A few months ago, on one of our routine phone calls, Ken surprised me and got a little serious. He asked me to do him a favour and agreed to deliver his eulogy at the appropriate time. And on another more recent call, he reminded me that I had agreed to do that. It was kind of odd for a few reasons. First, I'm a few weeks older than Ken, which he reminded me about several times. Second, it felt a little macabre, so I laughed it off as just Ken being his world champion hypochondriac self. Third, Ken being Ken, I was given some quite specific instructions regarding the tone, mood, and content of a Baird eulogy. And as an opener, I had to promise not to attempt my Morningside accent, which I'm very proud of, which Ken assures me is horrible, even when assisted by my favourite Glenlivet. So cruel. But I was instructed that there must be nothing morbid, sad, gushy, overly religious or depressing. Instead, I was instructed to focus on how planet Earth was so lucky to have had the benefit of his presence, his advice and experience, his amazing knowledge and intelligence. So modest. He didn't include words like cynical, stubborn and arrogant on his list. So I guess I better not mention them either. We have to remember that Ken being wrong was not part of his DNA or vocabulary. And of course, as we all know, he was never wrong, so the situation was never really tested. Lastly, he insisted I raise the topic of his various wives and girlfriends. He was unshakable in his conviction that it was they that had misunderstood him and just didn't realize what a perfect partner he really was. He actually denied with a straight face being a male chauvinist pig, even though I think he was one of the creators of that genre. I think I deserve a medal for the number of interminable phone calls before, during and after each relationship ended. During these calls, Ken surpassed himself and gave full rein to his talents for forensically analysing people and situations down to the microscopic level. Ken was a man of detail. I clearly remember one of these particularly challenging relationship calls when he told me he was considering yet another marriage. I froze, told him he was nuts, and a little tongue-in-cheek, I threatened to intervene and warn the other party to proceed with caution unless she wanted to live in the 19th century. I never had to do that. For once, he actually listened. Ken was convinced that he had immense natural talent, and I doubt he was ever accused of being either humble or modest. There was one skill set he was a little deficient in, actually very deficient in: cars and driving. Somehow, even as a teenager, these things never quite gelled with Ken. Other drivers were always creating problems for him and annoying him. Maybe his habit of driving around at 30 miles an hour was a contributory factor. However, between you and I think the drivers of Scotland can now unfortunately relax. So back to Ken's talents. He wouldn't forgive me if I strayed far from that topic. I have a small but perfect example, which I think is a family classic story. I believe Richard MacLeod is watching these proceedings online from the Cayman Islands. Hi, Richard. Richard, you'll recall an event when the three of us in our student days were hitchhiking in Europe. And one morning the two of us packed everything up while Kenneth slept. The two of us then stood at the roadside trying unsuccessfully to thumb a lift for at least a couple of hours while Ken continued to rest. Eventually he got up and deigned to join us at the roadside. He held out his thumb and of course the next car stopped. We were then subjected to days of his smug, self-satisfied grin and many comments about his superior skill sets. Just one of many, many examples of classical Baird. Anyway, I got a lot of these instructions regarding tone at an event like this. I nearly chickened out of doing it at all, but I guess my conscience kicked in when I raised his dad's eulogy request in an email exchange with Ken's son, Chris. When I hinted at what Ken has specified as a tone, it was a huge relief to me when Chris said, and I quote, "That tone sounds just like Dad." Thank you for that, Chris. We did both share an interest in politics, and Ken was active in his community. You can probably imagine the time we spent putting the world to rights during those fun times of Brexit and Indy Ref 1. If the powers that be had only listened to the pair of us, or at least to Kenneth, then the world would of course be a way better place than it is today. And he was genuinely thrilled when some of his letters to the London Times were published. I think he forwarded the link extensively. That modesty again. So Kenneth, it has been quite a journey. And as I am sure you will be monitoring and critiquing today's events, it was a pleasure knowing you. Your many unique qualities were indeed a rare mixture that many of us will miss. Goodbye, Ken.